The topic of corruption is not discussed in Kenyan society, even though it's a serious problem facing the country.
Because the marginalized people and the poor people are still becoming poor. In Kenya, when you're born in poverty, chances of you making it are really not that high. When you're born in middle class, you have a chance of becoming very wealthy. And if you join the government, then you become corrupt and people bribe you and you become a billionaire in Kenyan standards. And that's the biggest problem we have over there.
The fear of being killed or silenced for speaking out against corruption has caused many Kenyans to lose hope that change will occur.
There's no point of doing good job in this country. The future generations are doomed.
Police officers accept bribes from criminals and threaten citizens to pay them bribes. Nepotism is widespread in every profession, making it hard for educated people to get jobs. Tribalism and racism are getting worse, as the Kikuyu are given more opportunities than the Luos and other tribes, and 42% of the population lives in poverty. Why is Kenya in this state of corruption and what caused it? The Mau Mau Uprising has impacted corruption in Kenya today because the unethical transactions made by the British caused more conflict within Kenyan society. 132 years ago, the British became interested in Kenya during the Berlin Conference of 1885. During the conference, European nations divided Africa into individual countries. Britain created the East African Procreate in 1895. When the British arrived in Kenya, they were struck by how beautiful the country was. From the fertile soil and unique wildlife to the serene beaches of Mombasa and quiet savannas of Tsavo, Kenya had a beauty that could not be found in England.
Before the British arrived in Kenya, Kenya was not a country. It was different tribes which ruled themselves. They were ruled by different chiefs who had a council of elders. So what the British did when they came, they went to chiefs and they gave them gifts, they gave them bribes, they gave them guns. And because these tribes that were the Kenya now we have, they had inter-community fights. So they would come and they would tell Chief Njiri and tell him, hey, listen, if we give you guns, you'll be able to fight the Kambas more. But that will not be for free. It will be for the exchange of land. Step by step, village by village, tribe by tribe. Within 20 years, Kenya was already colonized.
It was obvious that the British were not going to leave anytime soon, and that they needed to devise a plan to get the British out of their country.
So they decided to have a resistance, like a struggle, an armed struggle resistance.
And with that, the Mau Mau were born. The name Mau Mau was code word in Kikuyu, which means Mzungu Urundi Ulaya na Mwafrika Ajitawale. In English, this means white men go back to Europe and let the Africans rule themselves. British supporting Kenyans were labeled as traitors, and being a traitor was their death sentence.
Families in Kenya like mine was a family of collaborators. They were collaborating with the British. So they will uplift people like me or like my great-grandfather or my grandfather. And the other people wouldn't be uplifted at all.
Joining the Mau Mau was not an easy task. To become one, each person would have to take an oath to swear your allegiance in secrecy to the Mau Mau cause.
So we all came together into groups and took an oath. The African was your brother, but when you see a white man, you should know he is your enemy.
The Mau Mau used extreme methods to terrorize British settlers into leaving. Some of these methods included killing entire families of white settlers, cutting livestock's legs or throats so that they would die in agony, and setting British dogs on fire and having them run through crops. Once the settlers and traders of the Mau Mau were killed in multitude, the British settlers became terrified of this movement that was destroying their way of life, and called Britain to enact a state of emergency. Once this was enacted, British soldiers came to detain what they call the Mau Mau Menace.
Troops are in the streets of Nairobi. Sir Evelyn Baring, the governor, salutes the men of the Lancashire Fusiliers who have flown in to help clear his colony of the Mau Mau menace, which has struck fear into Kenya's very heart.
And they tried everything. They got armies from other countries, other African countries, from Asia, from India, to start and cause, to try and calm down the Mau Mau. It's not just that they labeled them a terrorist organization. But eventually, when they realized that they're not going to win, and the whole masses is behind the Mau Mau, and it was just a downhill slope from there.
To make matters worse for the British, a new figure was developing within the rebellion. He was a leader, a soldier, and struck fear into the hearts of the settlers. His name was Jomo Kenyatta. Jomo Kenyatta advocated for the Kenyan independence and for the British to give the Kenyans the land they deserved. This stance made him branded by the British as a Mau Mau supporter, even though he continually denied being a member.
He spoke damn well when he addressed a public meeting. He could electrify the crowd.
It was a focus for the growing call for the British to get out.
We must show the world that some of them have been wrong, that some of them have misunderstood us, and it's only by our action they will know that we mean business.
Jomo Kenyatta's encouragement for freedom caused the British settlers to worry and advocate for his arrest. After Kenyatta's arrest, the Mau Mau grew stronger and the fight for freedom raged. Years passed and the British realized that no matter how many people they tortured, kidnapped, or arrested, that the Mau Mau would not end until the British left Kenya. As a result, the British and Kenyatta struck a deal to allow the British to stay on their land and the Kenyans to have theirs.
So they had to come down and come up with a deal that okay, we are not gonna say anybody leaves, but we are going to share this land. We're gonna give you the Kenyans, the Africans, their land, and also the British will still stay here, and that is why today you find that almost 7% of the Kenyan population is actually white, is actually British.
Although the deal between Jomo Kenyatta and the British seemed fair, the British told him that he could also be president of Kenya and choose his own parliament, where he could appoint his own representatives, have his son take office in the future, and have a distorted type of democracy. The British also told Kenyatta that he could have the majority of the land and divide it amongst his own parliament. Through this deal, certain Kenyans were able to have the best plots of land in Kenya, become high officials in the government, and become wealthy through the titles and jobs they were appointed. However, with these conditions, Jomo Kenyatta also had to say that the Mau Mau had been dismantled, allow them to be called terrorists by the British, and not give the fighters the largest portions of land.
That's why you see there's a lot of inequalities. Other tribes feel very marginalized. The Kikuyus have become very dominant economically. They own pretty much the economy of Kenya. And, so even though there's a really, really big fight in Kenya, the poor are always becoming very poor. And the wealthy are becoming very, very wealthy. And it's unfortunate.
Due to this gap in poverty, a large majority of Kenyans have left in hope for a better life. The Mau Mau Uprising was a cause that's purpose was to bind Kenya as a united nation that is free from oppression. But the deals made between Jomo Kenyatta and the British have caused more conflict by creating a gap between the wealthy and poor, which makes corruption the only method that Kenyan society can use to survive. This lack of equality may be changed if society is willing to stand up for justice and the principles that the Mau Mau rebellion were founded on and work for compromise.